Between the two of them. The inside of Coates. Parker gets too heavily involved. And that's Whitehead and Coates.
Entirely unbiased opinion. Yes, we're at the Oulton Park circuit in virtual Cheshire for rounds 5 and 6 of the VRRC Civic Cup. Andy McEwen here in the comms box. Jack Oliphant alongside me. Jack, tin top racing at Oulton Park. It doesn't get a lot better than this. I know Oulton Park is a place that I clearly hold very close to my heart, and it was for an awfully long time your local circuit as well. Great that we get to enjoy the virtual version of it here tonight.
Absolutely, yeah, and the islands, specifically the island layout, is really good for overtaking as well at Oulton Park, which is a bit notorious for being a little bit difficult to overtake. But fingers crossed, the Civics will probably go 3 wide at pretty much every corner and prove me wrong, which I wouldn't mind at all, of course. Of course, we've already been to Brands Hatch GP, and we were at Thruxton last week, which caused a little bit of chaos, but fantastic spectacles all round, I would say. Andy's mentioned we're here at Oulton already, and then Silverstone National next up, then Croft, where me and Andy were actually last weekend, and then Donington National to finish off the season. So, you know, if you sat here thinking, oh, well, it can't get much better, trust me, it probably will. It's been a fantastic championship. Long may it continue.
Absolutely. I mean, great variety of circuit, and that really does sort of showcase how fortunate we are here in the UK that we get to enjoy all of these fantastic racetracks, both in the real and virtual world. As Jack said, we were at a completely different circuit a week ago, the high-speed sweeps of the Thruxton circuit down in Hampshire, and it was very much a Scott Bugner kind of night. He backed up his second and fourth place finishes from the Brands Hatch season opener, with second places all round. Qualified second, finished second in race 1, and then came the back row of the grid in the second race to back that up with another second place finish in the second race of the night. That was an awful lot of 2s, and it puts him in position number 1, not only over the night, but for the championship overall. Max Bird was also on form, winning the reversed grid race, whilst Max Edmondson was the winner of race 1, and so they were the second and third highest point scorers of the night respectively, with Scott Bugner, deservedly so, picking up the driver of the round. Never did he stand on the top step of the podium, but he was a driver that we were following an awful lot, particularly in that second race, as he carved his way up through the order. Jack, that really was a fantastic performance. I know Thruxton is a circuit where you can overtake, but doing it safely and cleanly and getting to the front in the way he did was really impressive.
It absolutely was. Sometimes you have to go into a little bit of survival mode into that reverse grid as well, and to be honest, Scott did everything he needed to, plus actually survive the first couple of laps, because there was lots of sort of bumping and barging, shall we say, throughout the entirety of the race. But the second half, as we mentioned, Scott was one of the shining stars, which is why he ended up with that driver of the day. He's also ended up with the, well, like Andy said, actually, the top of the championship order at the moment with 84 points. Max Edmondson, who is looking rather sharp here at Oulton Park already, he's on 76 and in second place. Max Bird in third and Joel Lask in fourth, and rounding out the top 5 is Josh Martin at the moment. The top 5, you would argue, you know, there's looking quite close, within about 20 points of each other. Then you've got Elliot Dalton Ayres a little bit further back, Eric Axelson with Redford and Andy Carroll, Andy Dorman, all trying to get into those top 5 positions, because of course that's where the prizes are, and we'll go through the prizes in a couple of seconds time, probably straight after this championship slide actually. But you can see just the amount of drivers that we've had entering the championship, and there's even a familiar face of VRRC coming back tonight. Is Nicky Taylor jumping in the championship for the first time, so looking forward to see how he handles the Civic around Oulton.
It's notable, isn't it, looking at that championship table, how many drivers there are outside of the top 5, even outside of the top 10, that you would expect to be further up the order. We've seen the likes of Will Redford, 8th in the championship. They're competing for race wins. Kyle Felvers was challenging for a championship in our most recent series here on the VRRC. If he gets to grips with this car, he could start moving up the order as well. Jordan Brennan down in 14th, Brad Smith down in 16th. There are lots of quick drivers, I think, with a little bit of a point to prove, to try and break into that all-important top 5, because if you finish inside the top 5 come the end of the season, well, these are the prizes up for grabs. An AGON 34-inch curved gaming display for the eventual champion, with second place in the championship receiving the Riggs SimRace 3 sim rig. 2 tickets to a round of the TCR UK Championship 2022 go to the third place driver. Fourth place in the championship receives 2 hours of online driver coaching, and PowerMax supplying the prize for fifth place, the Valeting bucket, with a weekly prize of the PowerMax Valeting kit for the driver of the round. As we said, Scott Bugner, the recipient of that a week ago. So getting into that top 5 come the end of the season, well worth doing. The prizes here on the VRRC are among the best you can get, I think, actually, for this sort of competition, and certainly well worth fighting for, and a real fight we will have on our hands, I'm sure, as we're getting into the final few weeks of the championship. As I said, after tonight we reach the halfway point of the season, so a very important pair of races coming your way in a little while. Before we dive into, first of all, qualifying and then the racing action, though, let's take a look, shall we, at this beautiful ribbon of tarmac in the northwest of the UK, the Oulton Park Island Circuit. Let's ride on board for a lap of one of the most challenging circuits in the country.
So across the line at Oulton Park here for round 3 of the Maximum Networks Civic Cup, powered by VRRC. Turn 1, very, very fast corner indeed. 4th gear, down to about 80 mile an hour, just trying to control that little bit of oversteer on the way, and car is quite nervous on the whole round this track. You'll see that going down the cascades here, trying to keep the wheel relatively straight on the brakes, but just feed it enough that you get a bit of that back end rotation with the rear of the car, and then you can start to modulate the throttle to get the car to pull its way out. Super committed here, down the way to an island bend in the hairpin, hard braking all the way at the point to turn in, and then feed the throttle in to get as good of a drive up out of the corner as possible. Really good overtaking opportunity that. If you can set the corner up a little bit wider than the driver in front and get a good exit, it might be a good drag all the way down here to Hislops. Trying to get as close to this barrier as possible and trying to get a little bit of a bounce as well through that left-hander. Set up the right so it's nice and open so it can get a good drive yet again all the way up the hill. Yet again, this gradient really helps with setting up overtakes here, so another really good overtaking opportunity. Up towards Druids Corner, probably for me the most difficult corner on the track. All about commitment, and you can see the amount of rotation there that happens mid-corner. What I have found is this track is quite hard to get consistently fast. Some laps you may be up 2/10, some laps you may be down 2, so really quite a difficult track to hook up all at one go, so qualifying could prove very difficult. And out of the last corner towards the line, there's a lap of Oulton Park. Make sure you tune in at 7:15 on Wednesday night on VRRC's YouTube, and make sure you give the video a like and subscribe.
So the Oulton Park Island Circuit is the challenge that awaits the drivers over 2 races of 20 minutes in duration tonight. But first, a 15-minute qualifying session, which is just getting underway now. Drivers on their out laps. It'll take them a couple of laps to get some heat into the tyres and to potentially get a little bit of clean air. As you can see, Civics racing around the circuit, finding that bit of clear track that you need to set a good lap is not going to be the work of a moment. The Island Circuit then, Jack, you were just telling me now you've had experience of driving all 3 of the available layouts here at Oulton Park, and this is the one you enjoy the most. Why is that?
Yeah, I did the Fosters on a track day, I believe, so the shortest conjunction of shortest version of Oulton Park, shall we say, on a track day. So obviously that was a bit dull because it just is a slightly dull compared to the other 2 anyway. And the full international loop, although on paper it looks fantastic, I just could never get to grips with it. I could just never find my acceleration point out of the hairpin, and the chicane before you get back onto the main part of the circuit just didn't really ever flow in my opinion. I just couldn't figure it quite out. So I absolutely understand why people enjoy it more than the island layout with its sort of very short, sharp hairpin. But in my opinion, it offers a good overtaking opportunity, especially in single mate series. And I was just a bit more, I clicked with it a little bit more. That's the only reason, I suppose. But I know full well that a lot of people, including yourself, Andy, just absolutely love the international layout, and for good reason. It's got some fantastic sweeping corners, and if you can hook up the hairpin, I imagine it's very satisfactory.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, I will be unashamedly blatant in my bias towards this circuit. It is the place at which I grew to love motorsport as a child. It's where I did my first ever work in motorsport, and genuinely on the sim and in real world is my favourite circuit to drive. I just think it's got such a flow, and it doesn't matter what layout it is. You're seeing even from these pictures just what a challenge it is. It's got the undulations, it's got the fast corners, the slow corners, lots of blind corners as well that require a lot of commitment, and in these cars in particular, I'd imagine it's an awful lot of fun. So yeah, certainly a driver's favourite, that's for sure, and I'm certain that most of the drivers out there now will be enjoying themselves, particularly Max Edmondson, who is currently fastest in the session, then ahead of Scott Bugner. So the top 2 drivers in the championship are at the moment the 2 fastest in the session, but in reverse order. It's championship leader Bugner in second with Edmondson ahead of him. Now there are some 8 points between them in Bugner's favour for the time being, so important here that Edmondson starts to take some points out of him. There, meanwhile, is Nicky Taylor, and that was Kyle Felvers slowing down to pull in behind him. Looks like these 2, who are of course teammates at HFT Racing, running different liveries tonight, I noticed, but we know they enjoy working together in other series. Looks like that's exactly what they're going to do here tonight. And Jack, I'm intrigued to see what sort of a Nicky Taylor we get here, because of the HFT Racing drivers, he's the only one really who has plied his craft in the real world in front-wheel drive, short wheelbase, tin-top racing. So I expect him to be strong, but of course, joining partway through the season as he does, he's not likely to be a championship contender, so he's potentially a very quick driver, and a quick driver with very little to lose.
Yeah, he can throw his weight around and pretty much get in the way, can't he, with no real pressure around him, although Carl Felder's trying to follow his teammate, has ended up flying off the road at Druids. Got another driver who's basically stopped. It looks like his front bonnet's hanging off, but I think that is just the livery on his car, unfortunately. But I think a lot of people will be slightly worried about Nicky. They'll know full well how hard a racer he is as well. He's one of the most exciting drivers to watch on the VRRC roster. We've almost been missing him, really. Not that the action has been dull by any means, but it's just when you see his name and you see his car appear, you just think, okay, something exciting is about to happen. Something's about to go down because Nicky's caught up to the pack. And fingers crossed we see that sort of, I wouldn't call it aggression out of Nicky, but I would sort of call it competitiveness and enthusiasm to get through the order, because at the end of the day, that's what we love best about him. And I think that's what a lot of the drivers like about him as well. They're always going to end up with a fight. They're always going to probably come out with a smile on their face, because he rarely ever makes contact, which is a massive plus point in his favour.
Yes, exactly. And he should be well rested and prepared for a return to racing as well, because Nicky has just been on holiday again for about the 6th time this year, I think.
Don't sound too salty there, Andy.
Hey, what can I say? I've been working hard all year long. The idea of a nice week in the sun somewhere is very appealing to me, but Nicky has been able to enjoy that, and that's why he's not been with us for the first 2 weeks, but he's with us, we believe, for the rest of the season, which is good news indeed. Seeing a few improvements there a bit further back. Jordan Brennan, look, is 3rd fastest. Now, Jordan was not able to race with us last week, so he's another driver who really has kind of fallen out of contention for the championship, which is a real shame, because he is a real-world Civic Cup driver. He knows these cars really well, and he's showing how quick he is in them. 3rd fastest right now as he bails for the pit lane for a mid-session tyre change.
Yeah, his rival on the real-world track, Max Edmondson, actually, is pipping him, though, so far, isn't he, with those 40 kilograms on board. Also very interesting, I was about to make the point, and actually, look at that top 5 is really about to prove my point. The weight we thought was going to be a big deal here at Oulton Park, but actually it seems that you can have any weight on board and be, fairly competitive. That's why we got all 5 different weight ballasts on board on that top 5. Max Edmondson with 40, Bugner with 30, Brennan with 50, Dorman with none, and Elliot Dalton-Ayres with 10. So it's brilliant to see that, the ballast is sort of making it very competitive. This is what we want to see.
Well, and in fact, with Joel Laskin 6th on 20 kilos, we've got all 6 of the weight categories represented in the top 6. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. What surprises me is that it's the heavier cars at the front, because Oulton Park is a nightmare for carrying ballast because of the hills, basically, and the fact that it's very stop-start. Lots of tight corners into long, flat-out areas where you're accelerating, often uphill, like here out of Lodge and over Deer Leap for Kenny Press, and that's where the ballast, in theory, should slow you down. But if what we saw a week ago at Thruxton is anything to go by, Jack, it may not be the outright pace which the ballast affects the most, more your long-run speed, because we saw at Thruxton, admittedly a circuit that is renowned for being a tyre killer, but nonetheless, I think the point still stands. At Thruxton, it was the heavy cars that struggled with their tyres through the second half of the race. Oulton Park can be tricky on tyres as well. You wear out that left front tyre through some of the high-speed corners like Old Hall and Druids. The traction zones, it's very easy to spin your wheels, especially when you're carrying the ballast. So I wonder if we'll see that come into play again tonight.
Yeah, I imagine we'll probably have to question whoever's on pole position. If that be Max Edmondson, obviously, we'll have to question him and see what the difference is between here, Thruxton and Brands Hatch, because Oulton Park is a lot more like Brands Hatch than it is like Thruxton. But like you were just describing, we could often see characteristics from Thruxton carry over into Oulton Park. So it's a bit of a challenge for all of these drivers, a bit of a challenge for us to guess that as well. But Edmondson seems to have the 1-lap pace. I don't think there's any denying that, as Brad Smith goes past one of the drivers. I'm not sure who that was going through the island hairpin, but yeah, Edmondson with that 1-lap pace will be hard to get past, because although we've been complimenting Oulton Park, as we should, a fantastic circuit, lots of drivers love it. It is famously difficult to pass anybody here. And the Island hairpin offers a fantastic opportunity. Into the Knickerbrook chicane is a potential brave one, and into the last corner Old Hall as well. So there are 3, maybe 4, if you're brave, into Druids or into Cascades, overtaking opportunities, but they're easily defended as well. So I think Edmondson, even if his tyres do go away from him somewhat, will still be in with a shot of that race victory and holding on to a good place.
Yeah, definitely. It's actually something I, perhaps controversially, quite enjoy about Oulton Park. I don't like it to be too easy to overtake. Drivers should have to work for every position that they gain, and they certainly have to do that here at Oulton. But I've seen plenty of Civic Cup races here over the years, and believe you me, they find ways of overtaking. So I'm sure that it will be exactly the same story tonight. Andy Dorman, look, 5th fastest at the moment for Andy, who's only 10th place in the championship standings, some 41 points off the top of the championship standings. Joel Lask, though, with an even bigger improvement, goes 3rd fastest as Scott Buckner goes off the road and almost collects the barriers at Old Hall Corner. But Scott Buckner now has Joel Lask behind him in 3rd. Max Edmondson also improved his pole position time, so he's nearly 2 tenths up the road from Scott Buckner, although Buckner also, I believe, did manage to find a small improvement on the previous lap. So it looks like those that came in for fresh tyres mid-session are really starting to reap the rewards.
I was going to say Edmondson improved, then instantly Lask jumped up the order, then Buckner improved, and looked like Buckner was just pushing a little bit too hard. He couldn't quite get up to grips with it as Mark Redford nests in the woods, we see, with the Kinetic Motorsport banner on the back of his car. Obviously, he's linked with his son, Will Redford, who I'm just trying to find on the timing tower. Where is Will 11th. Here today? Oh, he is 11th, yeah. So expect Will, although a different livery, is the son of Mark Redford. But I would say Will's at the moment probably out of position. We would expect him thoroughly in the top 10 at least, if not maybe batting around those top 5 positions.
Yes, Will qualified 3rd at Brands Hatch, but then missed qualifying last week. Had to start from the back of the grid in the first race at Thruxton. That meant that he got caught up in some incidents. So hard to go off his previous qualifying form, so to speak, because he's only actually completed 1 session, but that was a quick session. Brands Hatch, which, as you said, is not that dissimilar to Oulton Park in its characteristics. Jordan Brennan goes 3rd fastest now, takes that 3rd place away from Joel Lask, and has time for another couple of laps as well before the session is over. So Jordan Brennan starting to push on. He's got a car ahead that he can get a little bit of a slipstream from, potentially. Jordan Brennan takes the heaviest car on the grid into 3rd place. Bit of understeer there through Cascades, though, and that will have lost him time down the Lakeside Straight. Dave Buki jumps into 12th place as Axelson goes 3rd. Where did he pull that from? Eric Axelson was 9th position on the grid before that lap, and that was a huge chunk of time that he found to jump onto the inside of row 2.
Yeah, he purpled that 3rd sector, didn't he? But actually, that got very quickly taken away from him because Elliot Dalton-Ayres, who is only down in 8th position, actually purpled sector 3 as well. So Elliot Dalton-Ayres clearly flying in that last sector, even if the first 2 he can't quite hook together. Let's see what he can grasp with this time. He runs a little bit narrow, didn't quite carry enough speed and use enough track there, probably to really take as much speed as he needed. Won't be finding too much time. But Eric Axelson, fantastic sort of performance from him on that 1 lap pace. With 3 minutes to go, he's turned up right when he needs to. I think just having a look as well, Nicky Taylor is on a faster sector 1. Expect a quicker time out of him coming soon. Mark Taylor's improved a couple of times as well. So lots, Mark Hughes. So lots of drivers who are starting to get their final ultimate pace. Even though some drivers necessarily, like Max Edmondson, have decided that's it. I've had enough. I can't do any more. I'm in the pits.
Here's Nicky Taylor then down to Lodge Corner. Only 13th at the moment for Nicky, but let's see what he can do. As Jack said, he's improving on this lap. So you'd say that this should put him into the top 10. He only needs to find a couple of tenths to do that. How far inside the top 10 can he get, though? Nicky Taylor goes through to start what should be his final lap of the session. And no, it's not a top 10. 11th fastest for Nicky. Perhaps struggling. He'll have had a lack of testing, you would imagine. Certainly less track time in these cars than his opponents out there, and that's starting to show, not helped by the fact that he's carrying 40 kilos as well, but he's 8.5 tenths slower than Max Edmondson, who's also carrying 40 kilos, so you can't really use that as an excuse either. So I think it really is just down to the fact he's not had as much practice time pre-season and through the first couple of weeks of the season as those around him. But he's got 1 more lap to go, and in what is an incredibly tight and competitive qualifying session, Jack, the slightest of improvements in time are likely to give you a couple of extra positions on the grid.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't really feel too sorry for Nicky Taylor. He might not have a top 10 qualifying position at the moment, but he probably has a tan, and I know which one I'd rather have. It is very, very close. I mean, I think Tom O'Farrell has just put in our chat that the top 15, he's absolutely right, we should have probably noticed this earlier, but the top 15 are separated by less than a second at the moment. Which just goes to show, even though, yes, Nicky Taylor is in 11th place, it's not the end of the world as Jordan Brennan pulls over, clearly not thinking he's going to get a faster lap time out of this particular lap, which is weird because he did just go green in sector 1, although his sector 2 maybe is a little bit off. He has got about 5 seconds now to cross the line, but he comes into the pits, so it's not going to be an improvement for Jordan Brennan. Unfortunately, Andy Dorman is also into the pit lane, and they've both taken the checker flag. As a consequence, this is Elliot Dalton Ayres, a green sector 1 for Elliot at the moment. We know he's very quick in sector 3, as he got a queue of cars trying to make sure they don't interrupt anybody's apex. But as the checker flag has dropped, this will be Elliot's last attempt to make it up the order, maybe battle for those top 5 positions. Andy Dorman's taking the checker flag. Max Bird is taking the checker flag. They can't do anything to interrupt the flow of Elliot Dalton Ayres right now, and as he comes across the line, how's he going to get on? Boom! Into that top 4. Elliot Dalton Ayres with HFT. We're very pleased that he sees himself in the top 5.
Will Redford is the car ahead of him. He had briefly broken into the top 10, but then, yes, more improvements. See him drop down to 11th place, and Dalton Ayres 4th fastest. Really, really good effort. That now still got a couple of drivers on flying laps. We're seeing a lot of late improvements here, aren't we? And that was sort of suggested to us, actually, before we got into tonight's broadcast by Dave Marshall, who said that for whatever reason, the drivers are really struggling with an inconsistent track this week. It's something to do with the bumpy nature of Oulton Park, meant that some of them were struggling to hook together 2 or 3 consecutive fast laps. Perhaps not a huge surprise that we're seeing some improvements here really late in the session. Could we see another one here from Max Edmondson? He doesn't have to improve. Pole position's in the bag already, but it looks like he's on another really fast lap here. A 1:36.564 is his current benchmark. He goes through and improves fractionally. A 36.532 ends up being the pole position time. Pole position then by just over 0.2 of a second for Max Edmondson. He keeps his 100% qualifying record up. He's been on pole position the first 3 rounds of the championship, and we'll speak to him on the other side of this quick break. Qualifying complete here at Oulton Park for round number 5 of the VRRC Civic Cup, the 3rd week of racing, the halfway point of the championship, and it is a 3rd pole position from 3 sessions this season for Max Edmondson. Max, I think I'm going to start a petition to rename these qualifying sessions to the Max Edmondson sessions, because you have been literally impossible to beat so far this season. Is qualifying something you've always excelled at?
No, not really. I'm normally not this good in real life, but I'm happy with that one. First week I was 4/10 up the road. Last week I was 3/10 up the road, and this week I'm 2/10 up the road. So my aim was to be 2/10 up the road, and I did that on the last lap. So I'm pretty happy with that qualifying.
So they're getting a bit closer to you then, but not quite close enough. And Oulton Park, I think more so perhaps than any of the circuits we've raced at so far, pole position is key. It's not that easy to overtake here at Oulton Park. It's relatively easy to defend. So you've got to be feeling good now ahead of this first race.
Yeah, if we can get past hairpin, we should be fine, but I'll wait and see what happens there.
How confident are you about race pace then? Because that was one of the big talking points at Thruxton a week ago. Obviously, Oulton Park not quite as tough on the tyres, but you are still carrying all of that ballast. Do you have to sort of consider that? Is that in the back of your mind at all here?
Well, obviously, my aim lap was a 6 in quali, and within I did a race run this morning, and within the first 10 laps I was within half a second of that, so I'm pretty consistent on that side. But obviously after like lap 11, and I think there's only 14 laps anywhere, after lap 11 the tyres do start to go off, but we'll just see.
Okay, so if you can sort of pull out a gap by that point, then not too much to worry about, I suppose. You may have had all of these pole positions, you may have won twice, but the consistency of Scott Bugner is providing a bit of irritation, I'd imagine, because he hasn't actually won a race yet, and still he is 8 points ahead of you in the championship. So do you sort of have one eye on Scott? Do you get to the end of the race having won and think, oh, of course he's in second place, there's no escaping him?
Yeah, Scott's quick, I'm quick. I think this race we're going to plan on just working together. Unlike Thruxton, when he sent one up inside, he missed his braking point. But I think we're just going to work together. And obviously, Scott's been strong on the reverse grid, so I'll probably just end up following him through in the reverse grid. So.
Okay, well, best of luck, Max Edmondson. Then we're about a minute and a half away from the start of the race. We'll let you go and make your final preparations. But very much the qualifying king, Max Edmondson. It is back on pole position this week. Max, good luck for the race.
Thank you.
Max Edmondson then, I mean, Jack, he's the kind of driver that you just can't help but hate, isn't he? Because he is so annoyingly quick in these qualifying sessions. I mean, qualifying is not worth lots. You don't score any points for qualifying on pole. You score minimal points for qualifying on pole position anyway. And yet, those drivers that are good in qualifying also tend to be the ones that are up there winning races as well. So qualifying, a really difficult art to master. Clearly something that Max got his head around.
Yeah, and when you go into a track like Thruxton, you might think, okay, well, it's not the end of the world. I just want to be within the top 5, and then you can pretty much use a slipstream to race from there. But somewhere like Oulton Park, it's just difficult. It's if you're starting anywhere from about third row of the grid backwards, you're all of a sudden thinking that maybe the win is a little bit out of sight. And the fact that everybody knows that Max Edmondson is always going to be in those top spots, it makes it very difficult. All of a sudden, you've only got 3 or 4 spots to play with because you know Max is going to be taking at least the top the either pole or second place. As I say, a little bit demoralising from another driver's perspective, but you've got to admire his effort.